Tragedy of Haiti, one must first stand, mentally, on the ramparts of the Citadelle La Ferrière. Built in the early 19th century, this fortress sits atop the Bonnet à l'Évêque mountain, piercing the clouds like a stone fist raised against the sky. It is a masterpiece of military engineering, constructed by the newly free people of Haiti. Its walls are 4 meters thick. Its stockpiles hold 365 cannons and thousands of cannonballs. Every stone was hauled up the mountain by hand, driven by a singular, terrifying motivation. The French are coming back. In 1804, Haiti had achieved the impossible. They had shattered the myth of European invincibility, defeating Napoleon's expeditionary force and establishing the world's first free black republic. The citadel was their insurance policy, a physical guarantee that slavery would never return to these shores. But the French did not return with soldiers to climb those walls. They did not return to march into the jungle to die of yellow fever and guerrilla ambushes. The French returned on July 11, 1825, with a weapon far more lethal than a bayonet, an accountant's ledger. The scene shifts from the misty heights of the citadel to the humid, tense harbor of Port-au-Prince. On the horizon, the silhouette of 14 French warships, bristling with 500 cannons, cut a jagged line against the blue Caribbean water. But the man stepping off the flagship wasn't a general screaming for blood. It was the Baron de Macau, a diplomat carrying a single scroll of paper from King Charles VI. Inside the presidential palace, Jean-Pierre, the president of Haiti, faced the most brutal calculation in geopolitical history. The French ships had their guns trained on the city, but the ultimatum de Macau placed on the table was the real artillery. The document was not a treaty between two sovereign nations. It was a royal ordinance. The language was deliberately humiliating. The French king was granting independence to his wayward subjects. And the price for this gift? A financial indemnity of 150 million gold francs. The sheer scale of this number was an economic absurdity. It represented 10 times Haiti's annual revenue. It was a sum so vast it exceeded the price the United States had paid France for the entire Louisiana territory, a landmass 70 times the size of Haiti, just 2 decades prior. Here lies the cruel central paradox of this story. The French demanded this money as reparations. But in a perverse inversion of justice, the reparations were not for the generations of Africans enslaved, tortured, and worked to death on the sugar plantations. The reparations were for the slave owners. Haiti was being ordered to compensate the white planters for the loss of their property, that property being the bodies of the Haitian citizens themselves. Boyer looked at the harbor. He looked at the document. He knew Haiti was isolated. The United States, terrified that the Haitian example would inspire their own slaves, had embargoed them. Europe had frozen them out. Haiti was a pariah state, strangled by a blockade that was starving its economy. In that sweltering room, the trap snapped shut. Boyer calculated that the only way to enter the global community, the only way to be recognized as human rather than property, was to pay the ransom. He signed. In that second, the 365 cannons of the citadel became useless. The French had discovered a way to reconquer Haiti without landing a single soldier. They didn't need to chain the hands of the Haitians anymore. They had successfully chained the nation's future. The independence debt was born. It was the first modern instance of predatory sovereign debt. Haiti did not buy its freedom that day. It purchased a century of paralysis. The winner of the war agreed to pay the loser for the privilege of having won. It remains, to this day, the most successful geopolitical shakedown in history. This moment effectively shifted the battlefield from territory to treasury. France realized that extracting wealth through compound interest was far more efficient and cleaner than extracting it through chattel slavery. The formatting of the world order had just changed. When the Baron de Macau's fleet dissolved into the horizon, sailing back to France with the signed ordinance. The silence that fell over Port-au-Prince was not one of relief. It was the silence of a vacuum. To understand why President Boyer signed a death warrant for his nation's economy, and why King Charles VI demanded it, we must look away from the gunboats and peer into the terrified drawing rooms of Paris and the rotting warehouses of Haiti. This was not a military conquest. It was a political liquidation. In 1825, Paris was a city of ghosts. The Bourbon Restoration was in full swing, and King Charles VI sat on a throne that felt decidedly fragile. The shadow of the guillotine still loomed over the French aristocracy. They were terrified of revolution, terrified of the mob, and obsessed with restoring the old order. For Charles VI, Haiti was not a foreign country. It was a humiliation that wouldn't heal. It was Saint-Domingue, the lost jewel, the colony that once produced 40% of all the sugar and 60% of all the coffee consumed in Europe. Its loss had bankrupted thousands of French families. These families, the ancients' colons, former colonists, had not vanished. They had morphed into one of the most vicious political lobbies in French history. They haunted the salons of Paris, waving deeds to plantations that had long since been burned to ash, demanding that the king make them whole. They were the ultras, the far-right royalists who believed that if the king could not reclaim their property, he was no king at all. Charles VI faced a brutal calculus. A military reconquest of Haiti was logistically impossible. Napoleon had tried it 20 years earlier with 30,000 of his best troops, and they had been annihilated, not just by Haitian strategy, but by yellow fever and the sheer ferocity of a people fighting against re-enslavement. France could not afford another Vietnam-style quagmire in the Caribbean. So, the king needed a victory that looked like a conquest but cost nothing in blood. He needed to turn the military defeat of 1804 into a financial victory. By framing the demand as an indemnity, he could pacify the screaming lobbyists in Paris and simultaneously punish the upstart Black Republic. It was a way to tell the world, "You may have defeated our armies, but you are still our property until we say otherwise." If Paris was driven by pride, Port-au-Prince was driven by asphyxiation. For 21 years, Haiti had existed in a cordon sanitaire, a diplomatic quarantine imposed by the white powers of the Atlantic. The United States, terrified that the Haitian virus of freedom would infect its own southern plantations, refused to recognize Haiti's independence. Thomas Jefferson had famously suggested that the other nations should confine the plague to the island. President Jean-Pierre Boyer was a man governing a ghost ship. He was a pragmatist, a member of the mulatto elite who looked to Europe for validation, not to Africa. He saw the reality on the ground. The revolution had won the land, but it had lost the market. In the warehouses of Jacmel and Cap Haitien, mountains of premium coffee were rotting. Without diplomatic recognition, Haitian ships were liable to be seized as pirate vessels by any European navy. They had no access to credit, no access to foreign currency, and no ability to import the tools needed to modernize. The economy was regressing into subsistence farming. Boyer faced a domestic ticking clock. The Haitian state was broke. Without trade revenue, he couldn't pay his army. And in a country born of revolution, an unpaid army is a prelude to a coup. Furthermore, there was a deep, unhealed scar within Haitian society itself: the color line. Boyer represented the urban, mixed-race, mulatto class, educated, francophile, and commercial. They desperately wanted to reintegrate into the global economy. They viewed the rural black peasantry, the foot soldiers of the revolution, with a mix of paternalism and fear. Here lies the tragedy of the decision. Boyer and the urban elite believed that paying the indemnity was a business investment. They calculated that once the French issue was resolved, foreign capital would flood in, trade would boom, and the economy would soar, making the debt manageable. They were willing to mortgage the labor of the rural peasantry to buy admission into the club of civilized nations. The tragedy is that it was a bluff. Historians and military strategists now agree that had Boyer refused, France likely would not have invaded. The French fleet had orders to blockade, not to land. A blockade would have been painful, but Haiti was self-sufficient in food. They could have survived. But Boyer didn't know that. Or perhaps he didn't want to know that. He was tired of the isolation. He wanted the legitimacy of a treaty more than he feared the shackles of debt. The context of 1825 was a collision of two desperate needs: a French king who needed to buy off his domestic political enemies, and a Haitian president who wanted to buy his way out of loneliness. Boyer assumed he was dealing with rational economic actors. He believed that if he paid the admission fee, the racism of the West would dissolve and trade would flow. He was catastrophically wrong. He didn't realize that the global powers didn't just want Haiti's money, they wanted Haiti's failure. They needed the Black Republic to fail, to prove that self-governance was impossible for non-white peoples. By signing the ordinance, Boyer didn't just empty the treasury, he validated the French narrative. He legally acknowledged that the Haitians had stolen themselves from their masters. He turned the heroes of the revolution into thieves, and the French slaveholders into victims awaiting restitution. The chessboard was now set. The king had his paper victory to wave in Paris. The Haitian elite had their diplomatic recognition. But the bill was about to come due, and the people who would actually have to pay it, the farmers in the Artibonite Valley, the laborers in the fields, had never been asked for their opinion. The transfer of wealth was about to begin, and it would require a mechanism of extraction so efficient, so ruthless, that it would make the whip look primitive by comparison. The motivation here reveals a critical flaw in Haitian strategy: the belief that legal recognition equals economic acceptance. Boyer failed to see that the debt itself was designed to prevent the very economic integration he sought. The ink on the royal ordinance was barely dry before the reality of the number 150 million crashed down on Port-au-Prince. In the heat of the negotiation, the sum was an abstraction, a diplomatic price tag. But as the French warships retracted their cannons, the abstraction solidified into a terrifying logistical impossibility. Haiti did not have a central bank. It did not have gold reserves. It did not have a stock market. Its wealth was locked in the biological cycles of coffee trees and sugar cane, in the seasonal rhythms of harvest and rain. France had demanded gold, but Haiti only had soil. To bridge that gap, a mechanism of extraction had to be invented, a financial machine designed to convert the sweat of a farmer in the Artibonite Valley directly into the dividends of a shareholder in Paris. The first installment of the indemnity, 30 million francs, was due almost immediately. President Boyer ordered the treasury vaults swept clean. Every coin, every scrap of silver, every reserve fund was scraped together. It wasn't enough. The Haitian economy was based on barter and local currency, not international specie. This was the moment the trap revealed its second jaw. Conveniently, almost miraculously, a group of French bankers appeared on the scene. A consortium led by the Banque Ternaux, Gandolph et Thiers offered to assist the Haitian government. They proposed a loan to cover the first installment. This loan is one of the most cynical financial instruments ever drafted in the history of sovereign debt. It was the birth of the double debt. Here is how the mathematics of the swindle worked. The French bank agreed to lend Haiti 30 million francs. However, they deducted the commissions and fees up front. They also issued the bonds at a steep discount. In the end, for a loan of 30 million, the Haitian government only received 24 million francs in actual cash. Yet Haiti was responsible for repaying the full 30 million plus interest. Consider the circular absurdity of this transaction. Haiti borrows money from a French bank. Haiti immediately hands that money back to the French government. Haiti now owes the French bank the principal plus interest, while receiving absolutely nothing in return. No infrastructure, no schools, no hospitals. The money effectively never left Paris. It moved from the vault of a French bank to the vault of the French treasury, merely passing through the ledger of the Haitian state long enough to attach a chain to it. Haiti was paying compound interest on money it never touched. For the remaining balance that couldn't be covered by loans, the Haitian government had to ship physical gold. This wasn't a wire transfer. It was a physical draining of the nation's blood. Eyewitness accounts from the period describe a scene of grotesque irony at the Port-au-Prince harbor. Ox carts, guarded by nervous soldiers, hauled heavy wooden chests from the government buildings to the docks. These chests were filled with gold coinage collected from aggressive tax collection that was already squeezing the peasantry dry. French sailors stood by, tallying the weight. The chests were sealed, stamped with the French royal insignia, and loaded onto the very warships that had threatened bombardment just weeks earlier. As the ships weighed anchor, they carried away not just metal, but the liquidity of the entire nation. The immediate effect was a deflationary shock. With no currency left in circulation, local commerce froze. The price of food skyrocketed because no one had money to buy it, yet the farmers couldn't sell their produce. While the gold transfer was the visible wound, the royal ordinance contained a silent killer, a Trojan horse clause that destroyed Haiti's economic immune system. France demanded that Haitian goods be sold to France at a discount, and more importantly, that French goods entering Haiti be exempted from 50% of the import duties. This was the hidden cost that did more long-term damage than the debt itself. In the 19th century, import tariffs were the primary way a young nation protected its infant industries. By forcing Haiti to halve its tariffs for French goods, France flooded the Haitian market with cheap manufactured products. Local Haitian artisans, shoemakers, tailors, toolmakers, could not compete. A budding industrial revolution in Haiti was strangled in the crib. The country was structurally locked into the role of a raw material exporter. They would sell cheap coffee and sugar to France and buy back expensive finished goods from France with the terms of trade permanently rigged against them. By 1826, just 1 year after the agreement, Haiti was in default. They couldn't pay the interest on the bank loan, let alone the next installment of the indemnity to the king. Did France forgive the debt? No. They capitalized the interest. The unpaid interest was added to the principal, and the debt grew. It became a self-feeding organism. To pay the old loans, Haiti had to take out new loans, often with even more predatory terms. This mechanism transformed the Haitian government into a collection agency for foreign powers. President Boyer had to militarize the countryside, enforcing the Code Rural to force peasants to work harder on the plantations to generate enough coffee exports to service the debt. The government stopped serving the people. It existed solely to feed the mechanism. The transaction was complete. France had successfully monetized its former colony without the headache of owning it. They had achieved the ultimate capitalist conquest, all of the profit, with none of the responsibility. The gold was in Paris, the debt was in Port-au-Prince, and the chains were no longer made of iron, but of paper. The check had been signed in Paris, and the gold had been shipped from the harbor. But the true cost of the indemnity was not paid in currency. It was paid in the rewriting of Haitian society. By 1826, the year after the ordinance was signed, President Boyer came to a terrifying realization. The Haitian economy, as it stood, could not generate enough surplus value to service the debt. The free peasantry of Haiti had largely rejected the plantation model. After the revolution, former slaves had moved to the hills, engaging in subsistence farming, growing yams, cassava, and vegetables for themselves. They were poor, but they were free. They had no interest in growing sugar or coffee for export, crops that reminded them of the whip and the chain. But the debt demanded export dollars. The debt demanded coffee. To satisfy the bankers in Paris, Boyer had to do the unthinkable. He had to re-enslave his own people, not by ownership, but by law. This is the moment the structural trap clicked into place. Boyer promulgated the Code Rural Code, a massive legal document that effectively criminalized the lifestyle of the Haitian peasantry. The code was a masterpiece of totalitarian bureaucracy. It divided the population into two classes: the elite in the cities, who were exempt, and the cultivators in the countryside. Under the code, a peasant could not leave their assigned land without a government permit. They could not send their children to school, because school would distract them from the harvest. They were legally forbidden from opening small shops or becoming merchants. Their sole legal function was to dig, plant, and harvest. The Haitian army, the legendary force that had defeated Napoleon, was repurposed. They were no longer the guardians of liberty. They became the overseers of the debt. Soldiers were deployed not to the borders to watch for invaders, but to the fields to watch the farmers. They checked papers, rounded up vagrants, anyone not working on a plantation, and enforced quotas. The irony was grotesque. The French had left, but they had successfully outsourced the job of the slave driver to the Haitian government. The whip was no longer in the hand of a white colon, but in the hand of a Haitian officer, driven by the invisible pressure of the French ledger. This structural shift created a permanent fissure in Haitian society that remains to this day: the state against the nation. In a healthy sovereign nation, the government collects taxes to provide services: roads, schools, healthcare. This creates a social contract. In Haiti, the debt destroyed this contract before it could even form. Because every gourd of tax revenue had to be converted into francs and sent to Paris, the Haitian government ceased to be a provider of services. It mutated into a predatory state. It existed solely to extract resources from the interior and funnel them to the coast. For the next century, the Haitian government built almost no schools in the rural areas. Why? Because an educated peasant might question why 80% of the national budget was being shipped to France. They built no hospitals. They built no irrigation systems for local food. The only infrastructure built was that which facilitated export: customs houses at the ports and roads leading from the coffee plantations to the docks. This created a black hole in the center of the Haitian administrative structure. Politics in Port-au-Prince became a blood sport. Since the government did not serve the people, the only reason to seek office was to capture the revenue stream before it left the country. This sowed the seeds of the chronic political instability that would plague Haiti for generations. Coups became frequent, not because of ideological differences, but because the presidential palace was the only place in the country where money existed. The trap was not just economic. It was cultural. The debt solidified the power of the French-speaking, mulatto elite in Port-au-Prince. They became the intermediaries, the middle management of this neo-colonial enterprise. To rationalize their role as enforcers of the rural code, the elite had to adopt the mindset of the colonizer. They began to view the rural, Creole-speaking peasantry not as fellow citizens, but as a backward labor force that needed to be civilized through hard labor. The debt tied the interests of the Haitian elite to the interests of the French bankers. If the peasants didn't work, the elite couldn't pay the debt. If they couldn't pay the debt, the French gunboats would return, and the elite would lose their power. Thus, the French bankers had achieved the ultimate security. They had turned the Haitian leadership into their own hostages. By the mid-19th century, the trap was absolute. Haiti was caught in a vicious cycle. To pay the debt, they had to export timber, leading to the massive deforestation that strips the land today. To pay the debt, they had to underfund education, creating a literacy deficit that crippled innovation. To pay the debt, they had to suppress the peasantry, ensuring that the majority of the population remained outside the formal economy. The system was no longer something imposed from the outside. It was internal. It was the tax collector, the rural police officer, the customs agent. France had designed the architecture of a prison, but it was the Haitians who were forced to lay the bricks, locking themselves inside a structure where freedom was just a word on a flag, while debt was the reality of the soil. By the dawn of the 20th century, the independence debt had ceased to be a mere financial obligation. It had metastasized into a geopolitical cancer. The patient, the Haitian state, was now in the terminal phase of organ failure. The structural trap established in the 1820s had worked exactly as designed. For nearly 80 years, Haiti had been bleeding capital. Every ounce of surplus wealth created by the coffee harvest was siphoned out of the country to pay French bondholders. The result was a vacuum where a nation should have been. Without money, there was no stability. The Haitian presidency became a death sentence. Between 1911 and 1915 alone, Haiti burned through 7 presidents. They were assassinated, blown up in their palaces, or forced into exile, not because they were uniquely incompetent, but because the country was ungovernable. A starving state turns on itself. The government had no funds to pay the army, so the army revolted. It had no funds to silence the opposition, so the opposition rioted. The debt had created a revolving door of chaos, and standing on the threshold, watching with hungry eyes, was a new player. As World War I approached, France's grip on the Caribbean began to slacken, distracted by the looming conflict in Europe. Sensing an opening, the United States turned its gaze towards Haiti. But the Americans did not come with the clumsy diplomacy of the 19th century. They came with the cold precision of corporate raiding. The National City Bank of New York, the ancestor of modern Citibank, saw an opportunity in Haiti's misery. They began to buy up shares of the National Bank of Haiti, effectively privatizing the country's treasury from the inside. They urged the U.S. State Department to intervene, arguing that the instability in Haiti, caused, of course, by the debt, was a threat to American interests. The collapse of Haiti's sovereignty didn't happen with a bang, but with a bank robbery. If there is a single date that marks the absolute nadir of this tragedy, it is a humid afternoon in December 1914. This was the moment the pretense of diplomacy was finally dropped for naked piracy. Under the guise of protecting the assets from Haitian instability, a detachment of United States Marines landed in Port-au-Prince. They did not march to the palace or the forts. They marched directly to the vaults of the National Bank of Haiti. In an operation that would be deemed a felony in any other context, the Marines seized $500,000 in gold reserves, the modern equivalent of tens of millions of dollars. This was the last remaining collateral the Haitian government possessed, the only thing backing their local currency. The soldiers loaded the gold into crates, hauled it to the wharf, and loaded it onto the USS Machias. The ship set sail immediately for New York City, where the gold was deposited into the vaults of Wall Street. Haiti was now effectively a hollow shell. They had lost their liquidity, their reserves, and their dignity. 7 months later, following the brutal mob assassination of President Villebrun Guillaume Sam, the United States used the chaos as a pretext to launch a full-scale invasion. But the Marines didn't just land to keep the peace. They landed to secure the ledger. For the next 19 years, Haiti was under U.S. military occupation. The first major order of business was not humanitarian aid. It was the Haitian-American Convention of 1915. This treaty granted the United States total control over Haitian finances. The U.S. appointed a financial advisor, an American official who had absolute veto power over all Haitian government expenses. The priority was made explicitly clear: pay the foreign bankers, Wall Street and remaining French debts. Pay the costs of the U.S. occupation. If anything is left over, fund the Haitian government. Usually there was nothing left over. The collapse was total. The Haitian legislature was dissolved. When they refused to ratify a U.S. written constitution that allowed foreigners to own land, something forbidden since 1804, the Marines locked the doors of the parliament. The constitution was forced through via a sham referendum. To build roads for military patrols, the U.S. reinstated the corvée system, forced unpaid labor. Haitian peasants were once again dragged from their homes, roped together, and forced to work at gunpoint. It was a haunting echo of the slavery they had overthrown a century prior. The cycle had fully closed. The occupation ended in 1934, but the financial stranglehold did not. The U.S. maintained control of Haiti's finances until the debt was fully liquidated. The final bitter moment of this saga arrived in 1947. Haiti wrote the final check. After 122 years of starvation, after sacrificing 4 generations of education, healthcare, and infrastructure, the independence debt was finally paid off. But it was a Pyrrhic victory. The collapse had already happened. The money that should have built a power grid, a sewage system, and a university system during the crucial industrialization era of the 19th and early 20th centuries was gone forever. Haiti entered the modern era with a treasury that had been looted not once, but continuously for over a century. They had honored their debt, but in doing so, they had destroyed their nation. The institutions were weak, the army was corrupt, the elite were predatory, and the people were destitute. The world looked at Haiti in 1947 and saw a failed state. They saw poverty and blamed it on bad culture or incompetence. They did not see the invisible crater left by the extraction of billions of dollars. They did not see that the house had collapsed because the foundation had been sold, brick by brick, to pay for the right to exist. When the final payment was made in 1947, the books were closed, the receipts were filed, and the world moved on. But history does not vanish just because a debt is marked paid. If one were to conduct a forensic autopsy of this geopolitical tragedy today, standing amidst the rubble of Port-au-Prince and looking across the ocean to the boulevards of Paris, the cause of death becomes undeniably clear. It was not a natural death. It was a century-long extraction of vitality. In 2022, a team of researchers and economists attempted to calculate the true cost of the independence debt. They didn't just look at the face value of the francs. They calculated the opportunity cost: the schools not built, the hospitals not staffed, the businesses not funded because the capital was flowing to France. The number is staggering. Estimates suggest that the tribute paid by Haiti to France extracted between $21 billion and $115 billion in lost economic growth from the Haitian economy. To visualize this, imagine a massive skyscraper made of solid gold. That skyscraper belongs in the center of Port-au-Prince. It represents the roads, the power grids, and the universities that Haiti should have today. But that skyscraper was dismantled, brick by brick, and shipped across the Atlantic. The true winners of this transaction were not the French people, but a specific class of French financiers and the descendants of the planter aristocracy. The bank that handled the loan, Crédit Industriel et Commercial, CIC, built its empire partly on the commissions from Haitian misery. The Eiffel Tower era of Parisian modernization was funded, in small but significant part, by the sweat of the Haitian coffee farmer. Looking back with the clarity of hindsight, it is easy to condemn President Boyer for signing the ordinance in 1825. Critics argue he should have called France's bluff. The French public had no stomach for another war. The blockade would have eventually leaked. However, the lesson of 1825 is a brutal lesson in realpolitik. Boyer was faced with a choice between 2 forms of death: sudden death, refuse the debt, face continued military threat, and remain a pariah state, completely cut off from the global nervous system of trade. Slow death, accept the debt, gain entry to the club of nations, but bleed slowly from a financial artery. Boyer chose slow death, hoping that time would heal the wound. He gambled that political legitimacy was worth the economic price. He was wrong. The lesson for modern strategists is clear. Legitimacy cannot be bought. It must be commanded. By paying the ransom, Haiti did not buy respect. They bought contempt. They signaled that they were willing to participate in their own exploitation. The ultimate legacy of the Haiti indemnity is that it served as a prototype for the modern world order. It proved that you do not need to occupy a country with soldiers to control it. You simply need to shackle it with debt. France taught the world that sovereign debt is the most efficient form of colonialism. It is cleaner than war, it is legal, it is bureaucratic, and it lasts forever. Today, the Citadelle La Ferrière still sits atop the mountain in northern Haiti. The cannons are silent, rusting in the salt air. They point toward an empty sea. The fortress remains a magnificent monument to a war that Haiti won on the battlefield. But in the end, the citadel was bypassed. The enemy didn't storm the gates. They simply walked into the counting house. The tragedy of Haiti is not that they failed to fight for their freedom. It is that they were forced to pay for a crime they did not commit, with money they did not have, to satisfy a ghost that would never be satisfied. The debt is paid, but the account remains unsettled. Subscribe now so you don't miss any information, because when history is rewritten, you will want to be one of the few who foresaw it. Thank you for watching.